Others that will. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that being in the art group, generating new work, and the idea of getting on the cutting edge is so important, but our group has been discussing also what we need to do to stay on that edge as the technology keeps shifting. If we were to address, as you said, if we prepare for 5 years from now, but what is happening that is going to keep changing, and the idea of this new environment building into it somehow, or being able to think about the possibilities of being able to address this ever so rapidly changing landscape of actually staying on the edge.
Others from the audience. And again, since we're recording, if you just walk up to the microphones, it would be great.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mike McDevitt, Associate Professor in the former journalism school. So I have a question for, with respect to Group 5. What is meant by science journalism? So as far as I know, as a former journalist, journalists don't go to labs with white coats and conduct experiments. And we do know that science is a beat, and oftentimes science is divided up into many different beats at larger news organizations. So I understand that, and I also get that there's dysfunctional relationships between science and journalism and the public sphere, vis-a-vis global warming is the most obvious example, but many others. So on the other hand, I think that you guys might be onto something really innovative with respect to how the storytelling expertise of journalism and communicating with the public and holding policymakers accountable, how those journalistic skills and expertise could be integrated with how science wants to communicate with the public. So is that what you guys have in mind in terms of what would be new about science journalism or journalism science?
Mike, can you sort of distill that into, because there was a lot there, and I know it was addressed at me.
So you've covered the environment for magazines for many years, and you've written at least one book about it. And so what do you have in mind in terms of journalism science? What are the ideas that you are exploring that would go beyond what's traditionally thought of as a traditional beat in terms of how science and journalism might interact?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. So we are really lucky on this campus to have, one of the greatest concentrations of environmental scientists in both the physical and social sciences, and not just on campus, but as you know, at NCAR, NREL, the national labs, et cetera. So there are really interesting opportunities, in which we've already taken advantage of those opportunities, but we're asking the question of how better, or what else can we do to take advantage of those opportunities for students, as well as collaboration and research, creative work, all of those areas. But as you know, there's also tensions because in the realm of journalism, I can speak from my own experience. I'm a journalist, and so I cover these issues. I write about climate change on a regular basis. I was conducting a series of interviews today and yesterday, in fact, on the subject. Yet at the same time, I'm also colleagues with some of my sources. So how does that work? Because there's a lot of reasons to collaborate, and we have done that in the past. But how do we work out where is journalism and then where does something else begin? And that's something else I find very exciting. I don't know the answer to it, but those are kinds of some of the questions that we're asking. Other questions are, there's a tension, as you know, within journalism where, science journalists, if you ask, are you educators, many will go, oh my goodness, no. We heard Juliet Eilperin from the Washington Post say that. We're not educators. If education happens, that's great. And, I find that rather strange, and I think that journalists have a lot to offer in the way of public education. So, and certainly at a university, here at a university level, a journalist who is working in academia has a lot to offer that as well. So, what do we do with that? These are the kinds of questions that we're asking. I guess I'll just finish by saying I do not want to just sort of replicate, this is my feeling, I don't want to just replicate, how do we teach journalists to do a better job at covering science? We need to do that, and we will do that, but that's just a starting point. There's so many more opportunities for for what we can do. And I'll say in the science writing class, I have a number of students here from science writing. There are 15 students in the class. 8 of them are from the sciences, PhD students in chemical engineering, chemical physics, et cetera, and 7 of them are from journalism and mass communication. So that's really cool. What do we make of that? That's what we're talking about.
I do also notice a typo. We didn't intend to say we'll discuss journalism science. It's journalism, comma, science. I mean, it's a list. But so we're not asserting the scientific discipline of journalism.
Maybe we should.
That's what you think.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to go back to the issue of technology that Paul Bake raised, and I think part of the difficulty when people sort of were quiet was because this is the beginning of the process, and we are still holding meetings with each other internally with these groups, holding meetings. The groups are holding meetings to hear from people on campus, other faculty, students, and so on, as we gather information, thinking about, in a sense, what might be part of this new entity. I mean, I personally prefer to call it a college because I think that offers more possibilities, but that's a personal preference as opposed to any kind of statement about what's going to happen. But I think if you look down the list here, I guess I'm a little nervous about corralling this term technology so that it simply becomes there's technology and that this whole process is simply about technology, but technology in this abstract sense. So it's like, well, there's this technology happening, and the reason why we're in this process is because somehow we're supposed to get a hold of this tiger and ride it in some kind of way and be able to tell you in 10 years from now, this is how art's going to work, this is how curation's going to work, this is how journalism's going to work, and I think that that's a dangerous precedent. But if you look across these groups, you've got every one of the groups in one way or another is interested in thinking about the question of the relationship between the means of communication and the practices or the studies of different areas. And so you can start at the beginning where you've got nonfiction communication across platforms where you think about it as means. In the second group, you've got people thinking about how to study and understand the relationship and role of technology in society, in culture, and you can go on down the road. And I think part of what's exciting here is that you've got different groups that are coming at this question from different directions with the idea that a new entity would allow conversations and the studies of practices and the conduct of practices to come together. So in terms of technology, you're automatically asking questions about art and aesthetics. You're engaging, art historians. You're engaging artists. You're engaging the philosophy of science. You're engaging the social sciences that study the use of technology, the history of technology. So I think that's why it's difficult to answer the question that you would like to have answered. If it was as easy to answer, there wouldn't be all these fields engaging with it. So, I think that's what's interesting about this process.